Hi, my name is Connor Erickson. The article I'm presenting on is the mechanics of rotation in the Fosbury-flop, study done by Jesus Dapina. A little background, the Fosbury-flop is a high jump technique developed by Dick Fosbury. He was a high jumper in the late 60s and revolutionized high jumping by creating a new technique. Pictured here is how it's performed, but it was the first time someone went over back facing the bar. Usually before he developed that, jumpers would go chest over the bar in a straddle technique. And he found great success with it. He won the Olympics in '68 and set an Olympic record. And ever since his success, jumpers more and more adapted it over time. And nowadays, it's the only technique that's used. In my life, I'd never seen any other technique used. And a little background about me, I used to be a high jumper. In high school I was, and then freshman year I was at South Dakota State University on their track and field team, and it was one of the events I competed in. And this study, covering the Fosbury-flop, it aimed to examine the mechanics of the rotations involved in it. Focusing heavily on the curved approach versus the straight approach. So the curved approach is the approach to the bar where you run up and it's shaped like a J curve. So right at the end you kind of curve before you jump. Straight is if you just go on a straight line to the bar. And some of the hypotheses they tested in this was if leaning in during the approach promoted vertical takeoff and greater ground force, and then also if a curve produced more rotation. So for this study, there were just 6 subjects, and they were all male, and it was all from the same track meet. All of these subjects were they were adequate high jumpers. They had plenty of experience they had good marks, and this was at a official track meet held in Vallehermoso Stadium in Madrid, Spain. The study used 12 trials, which were the 2 best jumps from each subject. Here's a little picture explaining some of the variables they used. There's going to be a x-axis here, and this is an axis parallel to the bar, a y-axis which is perpendicular to the bar, and the z-axis being a vertical axis. These are the 2 tables covering the results. This top table is the results from right at the start, the beginning of the takeoff. The bottom one is the end of the takeoff. And the takeoff phase is when the foot you jump off of, it starts right when that foot hits the ground, and the end of it is right when that foot leaves the ground. So it's a very fast, instantaneous moment. So here are the 6 subjects. 4 of them had a curved approach, 2 had a straight approach, and these 3 variables here are the important ones for this study. The x, if I go back here, they're going to correspond with these axes. The x one covered the parallel axes, which rotation-wise was the somersaulting motion as you go over the bar. It's the shoulders dropping, the hips raising as you clear it, and the legs kicking at the end. The Y is going to be another somersaulting movement, more like if you lay on your back and were to roll over to your stomach. It's movement in that plane, which you want to minimize that during high jump, as you want to go over with square shoulders over the bar. A negative value for the Y would represent if your right shoulder or right hip were dipped more, with an increased chance of hitting the bar with a larger negative value. Vice versa, the positive value would be of the left side dipping. And then the Z axis, the vertical axis, that's going to be the twisting motion. So at the start of your jump, your shoulders and hips are going to be facing close to parallel with the bar, but by the time you're clearing it, they're going to be perpendicular. They're going to be pretty square as you go over. So the straight approach actually showed a smaller value, and you want this value to be more negative. So the straight approach had a smaller value, and they believe that was because a curved run-up could facilitate more rotation before the takeoff. And then the actual negative value with the z-axis, that would mean that the more negative it is, the more clockwise your body is rotated if you were to be looking straight down. So you want, as you're clearing the bar, you want your head to be more forward in the motion you're going, not your feet, as you clear the bar moving along it. So in conclusion from that, there's very little of the angular momentum that jumpers have at the beginning of the takeoff that seems to be present at the end of the takeoff, but there is a little bit beforehand. So a small part of the angular momentum necessary for early twist is generated prior to the end of the takeoff by athletes with a curved run-up. They found it more so than a straight run-up. And the data suggests that a curved run-up may be more favorable than a straight run-up. It's because it favors production during the takeoff phase of angular momentum necessary for that somersaulting motion. And it also works together with an increase in the vertical range of motion of the center of gravity. So if you think about if you curve a run out, if you lean in towards the ground as you curve, you're going to create an angle that's more favorable to generate a vertical force. And it's going to get your center of gravity higher. If you're leaning in towards the bar, when you make contact for your jump, it's going to produce a more horizontal force, and your center of gravity isn't going to get as high as it could if you were leaning in more. And so my analysis of this study, I think it helped to prove why the Fosbury-flop with a curved run-up is the superior high jump technique. Like I said, no one nowadays uses any other technique than the Fosbury-flop, and even at that, I see every one of them using a curved run-up. I've never seen any straight run-ups, and that's just because the curved run-up is shown to have better results. I think for this study, there were definitely a lack of subjects with only 6. I think it could broaden that to much more. And also, they were all male, all from the same meet. I think higher variability, such as also testing females, testing different levels, such as like professional down to maybe more beginner, other aspects like that could have benefited this study. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.